Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I'm really excited to share with you all some tips and tricks for boosting your marketing strategy on a budget. I know many of you all may not even have a full budget for marketing. And so we'll talk through some things that I think can help, ways you can really think through how you're spending your money, what the return on investment is, and the best way to go about getting the most bang for your buck. So let's get started. So first, let's talk a little bit about what we will be covering. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my team, a bit about Indianapolis Public Library, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, some typical marketing tools that you probably already have in your toolbox, whether you're using them or not, and then a few foundation builders. So looking at where you need to start when you look at implementing a marketing strategy, those foundational things, and then we'll move forward for tips to making it work. So we'll give you real life examples and kind of life hacks. So a little bit about me. I have been with the Indianapolis Public Library for 3 years, and I launched this department 3 years ago when there hadn't been a communications department for about 5 years. So we really started from the ground up. And also, a little bit, you can read the rest of it, but I've worked with Oprah, and I got to meet Oprah, and I always think that's just fun to tell people. And I also was just in Europe a few months ago, so that was an amazing experience. That was my second time in Europe. And a little bit about my team. So I happen to have a staff. Some of you may or may not, and if you do not, that's okay. All of these tips will still work for you. My team specifically is John Barnes. He's the public relations specialist. He's been around for years. Some of you may know him. He maintains our public relations operations and also our online events calendar. Katie Bueloff is our digital marketing specialist. So she creates social media content and web content. Myself, as director of communications, I focus on overall strategy and crisis communications. And then also Kelly Terry, she's our project coordinator. So she handles our printing and our project and production schedules. So she keeps us in line. And last, Carrie Watterson is our web content specialist. She runs our Kids and Ready to Read, so that's our parent blogs, and then she produces web and social media content circled around particularly her blogs. So a little bit about who we are. I won't read all of this, but our overall circ in 2017 was over 14 million. We've got over 400,000 card holders. That does not mean they're all active. And we hold about 1,200 programs each month. And then 4 million walk-in visits last year, 10.2 million visits to our website. We'll talk about the importance of your website soon. And then about 100,000 active library borrowers. So let's get to the good stuff. So you need to start by building a strong foundation. So there's some things that you need to have put in place before you dive into this whole marketing strategy thing. And so think about this. When you are looking at your marketing strategy, you always want to finish this sentence. My audience will think, feel, do, take action after engaging with our marketing and promotional initiatives because I will show or tell them the following. I would always think about this sentence over and over and over and over and always refer back to this as you're thinking through things. You may have to ask yourself more than once and really let this be your guide for your final points. So first step, know your audience. You've got to define those. And I think in the library world, it's different because we don't have all the fancy modules that larger companies have where they can really dial down on who their customers are. Also, if you are like us, we don't take hold of customer records, so we don't always know everything about our customers. So you really have to go with consumer behavior. What are some of the things that your customers are doing? What are they checking out? What time of day are they on social media? Things like that. And also, for instance, what's the volume that they're checking out books with versus your e-resources? What programs do they like? Really thinking along those lines. Education and socioeconomic dynamics. Some of that is baseline information you can find out about your area in general. Website activity and usage patterns, you should be able to find that information out. We'll talk a little bit about how. And then messaging for programs, services, and and initiatives. What is the message that connects the most to your audience when you think about programs, services, and initiatives, and also social media engagements. And again, we'll talk a little bit about how you figure that out as well. So, decide your messaging up front. What are those things you want your customers to know without a doubt? So that's define main messages that you would like your user to walk away with, so that you center your wording, images, etc. on that messaging when creating your marketing strategy. And you always want to end with a call to action. You'll hear me call that a CTA. So for instance, this is a really good example because you always want to make your call to action clear and concise. So sign up for the Indianapolis Public Library summer reading program today, right? That's simple. You don't have to think twice about what that means. And also always think about if your customer saw this in a billboard and they had 3 seconds to read it. You always want your call to action to show up in a way that is quick and easy to digest, very simple words, but something that stands out, and also an action involved. So we want you to do what? Sign up. When? Today. And think about cross-promoting. So this thought of if you like this, you may like that. Marketing is a continuous conversation, and think about marketing as a conversation. You're not doing that in a bubble. It's a back and forth movement between yourself and your patrons. So whether that's in print, on social media, email, verbally, whatever, consider other programs and services you might want to mention based on the current interest that user is expressing. So for instance, let's say you have a program in some kind of arts and crafts. Well, do you have something coming up that might interest that same group? Or do you have a program focused on families? Or if you think about Mango, for instance, if you all use Mango and someone has an interest in Mango, then how do you point them to books that might center around different languages and cultures? You've got a captive audience, so you always want to use it in the capacity when your audience is paying attention to you. And so here's a quote that I really like. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, right? What does that mean? What that means is really taking a look at, as you are creating your budget, so if you do have funds around what types of tools you're going to use and where you want to put your money, take full stock of your overall budget and assign monetary values to each tool and outlet yearly based on measurable successes. And that's the key word, measurable. So you don't want to use some of this you do by gut instinct, but also there are some numbers that you can really take a look at to help you decide where your money is best spent. We'll talk a little bit about that too as we move forward. And then reevaluate that twice a year. So you want to reassign resources when needed, and then feel free to take some risks as you learn what works best for your library system and customers, because it does take time. This is something new. I would even say for that first year, be very, very diligent about taking a look at what works and what doesn't work, and then ask your patrons, ask your staff, make sure you have ways of finding out how people are hearing about things, and then go back to your data such as website insights and also social media engagements. So identifying your marketing tools, you've got to know your tools and how to use them. So we'll talk about a few of the main ones that I want to talk about today. Print, and you know what that is: flyer, bookmark, postcards, anything that's printed, your email. You want to make an email list. It's so important. And think about really how you show up in your patrons' inboxes. PR and partnerships. We all have partnerships, big and small. And so how do you utilize those connections to further your message to both new and existing customers? And then your website, because your website is just an extension of your branches and really what your customers see online. And that includes SEO. So what that means is as your customers are searching, or anyone in your area is searching for maybe kid-friendly events or free family events, your website is what populates so that people can find you. So you've got to have that website in a state in which people can do that. And then your bonus tool, which is my favorite, and you'll see quite a bit about this with social media. Think of it, it's your very own channel, right? It's your news station, and you get to control messaging and guide conversations, again, for current and potential customers. So Print, print, and more print. And I am going to kind of make a joke a little bit about printing being the holy grail of library marketing, because I see that all the time. And I'm not saying that print is not important, but I am saying that you really want to think broadly and more on a global level about your marketing. And remember that printing is not your only option. So sometimes I often see that there's an overuse of print in an effort to share information, but there are several options available, so you want to make sure you take them in account before you print. Also, less is more. So as you're printing, you've got to have clear, concise messaging, and it's got to be impactful. And again, don't forget that CTA, that call to action. And you always want to think about branding, always. So for instance, whether you decide you want a different look for your adult and youth items, your branding standards should remain the same top to bottom. So that includes your fonts, your logo placement, always including your web address, the event location, and where additional information may be found. And then you want to avoid clutter. So take a look around your branches and decide, does anything here stand out? Is printing in one place so that people clearly know where to go for information? And you really want to think through this and create standards for your branches in order to make information easier for your visitors to find. So here's that real life example, those life hacks I was talking about. So as you're promoting events and services, because you'll see on the left, the first one is an event, and it's a workshop that was hosted at many locations, but immediately you see that space is limited, call today, registration is required. There's some things that just immediately stand out. What is it? African Dance Preschool Workshop. And as you go down to the bottom, even though we have partnerships, we always make sure our logo bookmarks so that our logo is easy to see because it's ours, right? And then as you move over to the services side, that's the front and the back. So at the front, again, you see our logo, and what do you see? Download and stream instantly, free with your library card. Take us with you anytime, anywhere. And then at the bottom of that, start streaming and downloading at indypl.org now. And on the flip side, 1, 2, 3, 4, here are the easy ways for you to find this information so that you can get started downloading with your library card. I mean, you can see it's just jam-packed with information, but there are some things that stand out. And then again, down at the bottom, we have our logo, our website underneath, and we have our social media icons so that people can find us always. We always make sure that our social media icons show up on our pieces. This is a Pride Guide ad. So we did an ad in the recent Pride Guide this year because our library system, we walk in the Pride Parade. And this is a really good example of how your branding looks in advertising if you all do it. We rarely do it. I do want to say that. This is particularly because it was a targeted audience that we decided to move forward on this. And also we have an LGBTQ plus committee that is now starting to work, and so we really wanted to show our support for the LGBTQ community. And again, as you look at it, simple messaging, really clear visuals, logo, social media icons, address, phone number, email address, done, right? You can't mistake what we're trying to say. You can't mistake who does this ad belong to. All of that, if I blinked my eyes, I could see it immediately. So think of it as a picture in your mind. And then think about printing for a large initiative. What does that look like across different types of printed materials? So for instance, the first one is a fact sheet. Again, down at the bottom, you see all of that information. You move over to the t-shirt. You see our logos in place. Also, you can't see it very well, but Central Library, the location is stated. And in a print ad, same thing. So these are things that can carry on from piece to piece no matter what. And you always, always, always want to figure out how to make that happen. And Deborah, you are welcome. So think about using your website to tell your story. And remember, the goal should always be to put our patrons first. I will say that we are in the midst of a website redesign. And I will tell you that we really hadn't touched our website in about 12 or 13 years. In the way of an overhaul, and that's just too long in the digital world not to take a look at the landscape of what your website is saying to your customers. But also we had continuous conversation where we had our great librarians saying, I use the website to help me, instead of, right, we use our website to help patrons. So we were finding there was some information that probably should have been internal that we wanted to go in and basically clear out and put that in other places, but to really make sure our new website was whole and clean for our patrons. And I will say this also, that don't look at our website now because it's not the one yet, but in January we'll be launching that pretty soon. So I hope you all check back in. I would check back in mid-January to see the new one. So let's talk about this, right? Get some outside opinion. Find a few sample users to give you feedback on your website through a survey, or contact a web design firm to give you some thoughts. And then take a look at what you can change immediately and think about an overhaul if necessary, as I mentioned. First thing, you want to create clear paths. Are patrons able to find what they need immediately on your website? Why or why not? Watch your numbers. This is, remember where I talked about your website numbers. You want to sign up for Google Analytics and keep tracks of items such as bounce rates. So that's how much are people looking on that homepage, and how quickly are they leaving? Your unique users, are they coming from different IP addresses? And then where are people accessing your website from? Is it social media? Is it Google? There's a wealth of information there, and you don't have to use every analytic, but you can take 3 and use those over a year and play with those. And then if you can start a blog, be consistent. That's the key word. So you can post once a week. Try it if that works for you. And make sure that some of the information, you don't always want to do this, because sometimes a blog will be circled around things that are happening at that time. But if you can post content that's evergreen, like voting, how people register, things that are going to come around annually that you can just refresh, that's great content, because you don't have to think about it from year to year. And I'm going to answer that question at the end about how efficient is a blog. We'll talk about that. Also, as you engage social media, you want to use the social media to link back to information such as blog posts, materials, events calendar, and more to drive website traffic. The best way that you're going to get folks who are not already users is to link back to your website. And again, it just brings back, even your existing customers may not know everything that you offer on your website, or may not be familiar with all of your services. So drawing them back to your website is a really great way to do that. And so blog content works, and so do book lists. I will tell you, our kids blog is one of the top 5 pages, or one of the top 5 visited pieces on our website. It is absolutely phenomenal. But Carrie has really figured out, Carrie Watterson, who handles our kids blog I mentioned earlier, has really figured out how to work in content, as I mentioned, that's evergreen. So this Juneteenth post, she'll be able to use it next year. We had an event specifically planned, but she created content that can be used over and over and over, and then you get a book list out of it as well. And then put it in email. So are you missing out on this major tool? You want to establish a strong email list, and if you don't have emails already, you can start collecting those emails at events, and make it clear that these will be used for receiving great updates. You always want to make sure it's going to be a positive. Make sure you say that in a positive way. And don't be afraid to email customers, but you don't want to be annoying, right? So decide how often that's going to happen, and be open to feedback from your customers. If they're saying, you know what, this is too many emails, then scale back. Make them opt out, not in. So if you can do that, place a statement about the fact that their email will be used for XYZ on your library card applications with an opt-out checkbox. I would do it that way. And then cross-promote via email. So you use emails that will already be going out to users. I'll show you an example of this, such as notification of holiday hours, whole pickup announcements, material return reminders. You'll see how we use that information, especially for a notification of holiday hours, and put information on the site where people can click through and go to our website to find out more information about a specific big initiative or a program or service that we're now offering. And then e-newsletters are great. So you want to send those out once a month. I will tell you, Toledo Public Library has a really great one that you might want to sign up for, because I think they do a really beautiful job of graphics and really teasing you with some of the story. Also, some of you may be signed up for ULC's newsletter as well. But choose 3 to 4 main topics to highlight, and your headlines should be immediately interesting and eye-catching. And so here's a rule of thumb. As you do these emails, you want to shoot for an open rate of 34.44%. So know that you don't have to get 100%, right? This is average. This is a really great average, and a click-through rate of 4.99%. It's really small. So what click-through rate means is that someone is clicking on a link to further them to learn more information about whatever story or initiative or blog post or whatever you have there. And then here's a couple examples. You want to use graphics to grab their attention. So this is about us being closed for Labor Day, the top one. And then you see in the image that we talk about an exhibit that is opening soon. If you click there, it would have taken you to more information on our website about that exhibit. And then down at the bottom, we have a groundbreaking happening for our Brightwood branch. And what I will tell you about that bottom one, the top one went out to all of our patrons. The bottom one did not. Why? Because it's focused on a specific area. So what we did was send it out to patrons that called this branch their home branch, and also we used the service areas by zip code. And so we sent folks who lived in those zip codes this email only. So think about that as well. Using PR and partnerships, you got to build strong partnerships with local community publications. Utilize partnerships so that they handle PR if they happen to have more solid ties with local media. And then don't forget to engage with local bloggers. Local bloggers are your friend, and you want to make sure you know who those folks are. Cross-promote with partners on social media. So that means tagging each other, adding each other, having them post about things. You want to make sure that both of you all are creating a conversation at the same time with the same messaging, because all of a sudden now you have a larger captive audience. You want to employ community ambassadors who are willing to share about your library system. So Austin Public Library in Austin, Texas has a really great program. Our team is actually thinking about it, I will be honest, and we have not completely honed in on this yet. Our CEO does go on a tour to every branch every year. She's working on that, and that's really where we have a conversation with patrons who really love us and they happen to carry the message over. But we don't have a focus program. Austin does. You may want to take a look at that. So here's an interesting way that we engaged a partner. Adrian Matika, if you all should be familiar with him, he is the Indiana Poet Laureate. And he was an Indiana Author Award winner. Great guy. He was hosting programming monthly, or if I'm not mistaken, it was every week or monthly at our central library. And so we did a video about it. And if you look at that video and what it did on social media, 21 shares is tremendous, 1.4K views. People have watched this video for a total of 383 minutes. That's a lot on social media. So we used National Poetry Month, but also our relationship with him, because we knew he was recognizable. And then you flip over on the other side, and we know that he has a strong Twitter following. He's extremely active. So he posted about the program as well. And he tagged us, as you see, at Indy Library. And then you can see how many people retweeted, which was 12, and liked by 13 people. And that sounds small, but if you know on Twitter, Twitter's a place that's really challenging to get engagement for organizations like ours. So we let him do the work on that. And then, so social media is queen, and yes, I said queen, not king. And how do you use it is equally as important. Why? Because the queen is influential, right? That makes total sense. And so here's my opinion, the first one, and I will always say this is my opinion, is that we employ one social media account per outlet, and then we collaborate with other staff to create content. So what that means is engaging other staff members who may not be behind the computer, but having them send you information, having a core group where you all meet and talk about posts, and having them create posts and send you images. But you really need to create guidelines for what they send you and what type of information you need from them. We are working on employing our staff for blog posts as well. So making sure that they feel included in that conversation. Central Library, right, is the mothership in Indianapolis, and everything could easily turn to Central Library, and we do struggle with that because there are a lot of great programs there, but we would never want to forget about what's happening in our branches. And so the way we do that is we have a Library 3.0 team that we sit down with regularly, and we're working on having them post as well. And also, really look at growing one platform before moving on to others. I say for our industry, Facebook is the place. You know your audience better than I do as to whether Twitter or Instagram could work. I know some people do Snapchat. Frankly, I am very much so about efficiency. So if it's not going to yield a great return on investment for us, we don't do it. And so really looking at what that looks like and deciding our metrics up front is how we decide where we want to be. And also know this, the way that you message on Facebook versus the way you message on Instagram versus how you message on Twitter has to be different, because all of those outlets provide a different way of speaking and connecting with audiences. On Facebook, you don't always have to have a picture. You probably want to, but on Instagram, you have to. So how do you create imagery that is going to immediately draw someone in and then know your message comes secondary? That's the difference on Facebook. Your message is number one, right? And then the imagery is a supporting character in that. And Twitter can go both ways with that. So you really got to play with what your audience wants to know on Twitter. Number two, create regular dialogue with patrons and utilize events, videos, and Facebook IG stories as well. This is something we're growing in. I will tell you, we utilize that events option on Facebook so that people can tell us that they're coming. And it's been really successful, especially when we talked about our Center for Black Literature and Culture. This was a large event. The opening was, and we used the events area where people said they were coming to leak special images, to leak information, kind of a VIP section of sorts. And videos work really well. Here's the beautiful thing. You don't have to have a lot of equipment. We happen to have someone who is really, he's a videographer, but your camera is a video camera, right? If you've got an iPhone, you can easily create video, and you can also edit those. Learn those tools. Go to a class. Make sure that a couple people within your organization know how to do that, and that you have strict guidelines about what that looks like. And then video with a friendly, we talk about video again, friendly, recognizable staff member or a loyal user is a great way to tell your library stories. We highlight our patrons all the time, and so people in the community know those folks, but also we highlight our staff members because those are the folks that are on the ground. We also highlight staff members that are more behind the scenes that people may not see all the time, but it's kind of like a behind the scenes look at the library. And then you want to use Facebook particularly, well, all social media, but Facebook and Twitter work mostly for these as a help desk for patrons online. So if somebody has a question about, hey, I can't find this, or my library card isn't working, or I have a complaint, you want to make sure that you have someone behind that keyboard who can respond appropriately and respond quickly and respond in a way that is extremely courteous and knowledgeable. Or if they don't know the answer, to say, hey, we don't know the answer, give us a minute, we'll go find out. And also you can create an auto response on Facebook so that your response time doesn't look like 48 hours, right? So that immediately when somebody emails you, if it's after hours, it pops up and you can get back to it the next day. So it'll say, hey, we're not available right now, we'll get back to you XYZ. Also know that as you look for creating this help desk online, that crisis communication shows up where there's some major things. Make sure that you have someone who is stationed. Katie does the friendly, fuzzy stuff. I take over when a crisis communications happens, because that we know that can go any which way, and I never want her to be responsible for that. I always want to make sure I'm messaging around crisis communications in the same way that I would do for PR. And be okay with pay to play. Do your homework in order to understand the algorithms on Facebook and Instagram in particular. You all should know this. I'm sure you do, that that Instagram was bought by Facebook, so they work hand in hand. And try Facebook Blueprint for free training as well. There's all types of training out there. YouTube is a great place to find out more information, but you do want to keep up and up on how social media is working, because I really do feel like it is the continuous forward movement on social media that's going to keep libraries relevant. So here's our social media breakdown, a little bit about it. Our toolbox is full and growing, about 2,600 followers on Instagram, 12,000 on Facebook, 6,000 on Twitter, 700 plus subscribers on YouTube. And then we do use hashtags. Think about those. Hashtag Indy Library, hashtag this is IndyPL. And here's a little bit about our Facebook audience. I won't go through a ton of this, but we all have access to this information, and that's the big deal. So you can see what the percentage of women are versus men. You can look at location. You can also find out whether they're single or not. You can find out education levels. There's a ton of information, a wealth of information here to find out about your demographics, specifically who is following you on Facebook and social media. But also remember that these are not your only customers, right? That yes, this is who may be following you on social media, but you do have a whole audience of folks who don't utilize social media in this way. And so making sure that you never are forgetting all of your audiences. You know, we talked about defining your audiences. This is a part of that. So this is how it would look on Facebook. This is how it looks on Twitter. You can hone down on household income categories. Oh my goodness, they know everything. Everything from occupation, interests, all types of information that you'll want to use. We see most of our followers are women. And we also are able to look at Facebook in particular to find out when people are on our page. When do people best receive, this is also on Instagram, messages from us. So what time of day? We post only twice a day. And we know that at a certain period of time, for instance, I think it's like 8 or 9 p.m. at night, people are really interested in what we have to say. And there's a time in the morning that I cannot remember. I let Katie handle that. But twice a day, certain times of the day that people are interested in. And we also even look at every Sunday, for instance, we say, hey, what are you currently reading? Hashtag currently reading. We ask people that on our social media. And so at 8 o'clock, hopefully you all are following us on social media. You can see that conversation on Sundays. It's this back and forth of people saying, hey, I'm reading this, I'm reading this. And then you start to see patrons talk to each other where they go, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about reading that. Do you like it? So it's really great because all of a sudden you have this book discussion happening on social media that you just kind of create a room for it to grow. But you guide it, but you don't necessarily lead it. But we do make sure we always, as much as we can, respond for about an hour. Then after an hour, we just like all the posts or love them, but we don't have dialogue about it. So make sure you're using diverse content on Facebook and social media in general, intentionally bringing in diverse cultures. It's a great way to do that, especially with imagery, as you can see, or you're tagging in the last post, fiction and nonfiction Latin American YA books to read. We use a lot of kids posts, a lot of kids materials and driven content in order to make people feel less, for lack of a better term, threatened by that information. So we talk about 13 books to check out for Ramadan that are for kids. And so you see how that all kind of lays out there, but we always want to have imagery that's engaging. And if you look at these, we get quite a bit of likes and shares. We do local event-driven content on Twitter. So using pop culture as a conversation starter, right? So we said, for instance, happy birthday, Chance the Rapper. You can listen to his feature on the new Cardi B album for free on Hoopla, right? So what are we trying to do? We want to draw people to Hoopla and let them know, especially people who might not think they can find Cardi B or Chance the Rapper on Hoopla. You can, and it's free. Also, we looked at Janelle Monáe, same thing. We talk about Hoopla Digital and how you can listen to her new album for free. She was coming. And so all of these ways that we're bringing in the millennials and the younger audience to really show them that, yeah, the library knows what's up. And we know what's up, and you can listen to your favorite artists on our modules as well. So social media content around involvement in traditional advertising, as I mentioned, we did the Pride Parade. We walk in the Pride Parade every year. You see that post on Twitter on the left. 21 loves. We got a retweet as well. All the hashtags, Pride 2018, Indy Pride, books, libraries, using those hashtags. And then as you move forward, remember that ad I showed you? Well, we turned it into a post. And look at that thing. It got, 92 likes and loves 8 shares, quite a few comments on it. And we didn't use a lot of wording, right? That image is enough. And so really looking again at ways that we can draw audiences in about topics they care about, and how to make the library a champion in the community for things that we know that our patrons care about. Indy Book Fest Facebook ad. So this is about creating your audiences on Facebook. So as you do Facebook ads, if you're not doing these, think about it, and really play with how much money to put in those. But you can hone down on what audiences you want to use. So for instance, like if you look at up in the audience details at the top, you see excluded connections. Exclude people who are going to the Indy Book Fest 2018. Why? Because we don't include them because we want to spend more money on those folks who don't know about it, who aren't coming. And then people who match certain interests. Creative writing, author, writer, book lovers, literature, culture, Juneteenth, all of the African American, all of these are ways that you can again tie in certain audiences and focus them on a specific event. And we typically do these sometimes a week out, sometimes it's 3 days out, just depending on how we feel like attendance is going so far. So if something needs a little more of a boost, we put a little more money on it in a shorter period of time so that it has a larger reach. And then think about hashtags to increase your audiences. All of these are easily usable. Libraries and Instagram, Library Love, Bookish, Bookstagram, like if you're on Instagram, Am Reading, Book Love, there are tons out there. And also you can use imagery as well. So you see the little books down at the bottom. You can use emojis, even as hashtags. So play around with those. Do your research to find out what hashtags work. On Instagram, I will tell you 11 hashtags are average. Isn't that crazy? It sounds like a lot, but you can use 11 hashtags to draw people in. Don't use them up in the message in your original post. Use them down in the comment section instead, so that you save room, so that people don't feel like they have to read. You'll be able to find it on our YouTube page. So if you go to our YouTube page, you can find this video. And basically the main key points are Indianapolis Summer Reading Program, sign up today. Here's how you do that. Here's the website. Here are the dates. Again, you just see that messaging highlighted over and over and over in quick, fast ways. And now I am ready for all of your questions.
Jane had a question. Will PowerPoint hints and tips be available?
Say that again?
The PowerPoint, the actual.
Sure, I can make that available. Absolutely.
Okay. So Kim says yes. Thank you, Kim. That was a lot of valuable information.
Well, great. And is this how I see what the questions are? Does anybody have any other questions? I felt like there were some while I was talking. Angela in particular had a few.
You see them?
Do I scroll up here? There we go. All right. I am finding your questions, and please, by all means, continue to send those. Let's see who had the first one. Okay. So Angela said, will we be able to access the information presented us today? That was a resounding yes. And you are welcome, Deborah, for the sample. So I'm just following up. Angela, it sounds like you all are doing a website launch, so you know how much work that is. But it's so exciting when it starts taking shape. How effective is a blog? So there we go. It just depends. It depends on how interesting your content is, and then how you are using that content in, for instance, social media, or making people aware of your blog. And effectiveness, I will tell you, you have to decide what those metrics are for it being effective. You are able to take a look at, again, what people are clicking on, but just some tips for how you blog or what information you include. That evergreen content is great. Kids and parents information is great. Thinking about times of the year, because right now, for instance, you saw in a lot of our posts, we had to link to outside sources for certain times of the year, even though people were interested in it. We'd love for us, for our blog to be the master of that information as we're posting. So really, really using it on social media is a great way to draw people back to your blog. Should you have different departments doing their own blog? I say no. I say you just need one. For kids, parents, and just adult content, just call it your blog. There's no reason why you need to have several, because I will tell you, finding enough content and finding the time to create these blog posts is going to be hard enough. So if you're getting people responding with information, let's say you do 1 to 2 blog posts a week, great. Now you can spread it out with all of the content from different departments. So that's my thought. And so you asked, should it come from one department? I think that one department should be the filter, where you are making sure that the tone is correct, making sure it fits the personality of your blog, making sure the content is relevant. So yes, you need to have an overseer, but again, that information can come from anywhere. I think I'm, okay, let's see. How about other libraries from other cities? I don't fully understand that question. Oh, is it, Angela, were you talking about partnering with other libraries from other cities? Is that what you were meaning there? Yes. Okay. You know what? We have at times found that helpful, or that we were able to do it. I guess it would depend on what that looks like and how you were trying to partner. I will be very honest and say most of the time when we really work with libraries from other cities, what we are focused on is tips and tricks and sharing intel with each other, less about trying to partner. And I say that because so much of what we do is so based on our regions that it really is hard to partner across the board. So we find that the best way to do that is, where we are sharing information and ideas with each other. But I have really great relationships with library folks across the country who are in my position. So that would just be my thoughts. What tools do you use to create your images for flyers and social media? We do employ a graphic designer. He uses, I'm sure he uses the Adobe Creative Suites for imagery. So I will just be very honest in that we don't do it in-house. We do like if we're doing a partnership, we get images from our partners. If it's a person or an author, we always ask the author for their official images, and then we'll use Publisher to create some things in-house sometimes. But for the most part, we do employ an outside graphic designer. And then, should a library have a tangible newsletter versus an e-newsletter? That's a really great question. I will tell you, I don't ever see us going down that road of having a tangible newsletter, that our focus would mostly be e-newsletter. I know the amount of work that goes into a newsletter, and I just can't imagine a capacity for us to do that in my department. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. I just know also, like our printing budget, when I think about what that would cost us, the return on investment for us, it wouldn't work. Also, because of the ways that we share library information in print with community newspapers, we find that that's extremely helpful to reach out to communities specifically. So we really don't feel like we just need a tangible newsletter, but an e-newsletter I'm always a champion of. And then trying to get, we were trying to get a whole county of libraries to partner for an event. Yeah, I can imagine, and I would imagine it's not because people aren't open, right? It may be just the capacity and the time involved in that could be challenging. But again, I don't know what county you're in and how that might work. Because of how large we are in Marion County, I couldn't see that as being easily done. Unless we talked about maybe Johnson County, but we haven't tried it. Barbara Dixon, you say, how would a small library get a newsletter started? So Barbara, help me out. Are we talking e-newsletter? Are we talking like a printed newsletter? E-newsletter, there we go. There are plenty of modules out there that you can use to create a newsletter. Constant Contact is one of them. I'm trying to think of some others. Constant Contact, you could always use a MailChimp also is a module, and looking at those and deciding what's going to work best for you economically. to find out how to create an e-newsletter. But really, Barbara, I would have to know a little more information, but are you all already sending out emails about library, like reminders to people? No, nothing. Wow, okay. So you go back to that slide where I said start that email list. That's where you want to start. I wouldn't start an e-newsletter until I had a good list going, and deciding what that percentage is going to be based on how many library card holders you have. And when you feel like you have a substantial enough list to get started, and then from there, you could begin to create that e-newsletter. And you have to forgive me because I'm not familiar with what Evergreen is.
It is actually the library card catalog system that about 120 libraries in Indiana use. It's through the Indiana State Library.
But does it have email addresses attached to it?
It may. I haven't actually used it that much either since I've been here.
Okay, so Barbara, does it have email addresses attached to it? Because if it doesn't, again, it's just back to starting that email list is really where you want to start before you even think about creating this email newsletter. You do that kind of in the background, and then you start with a strong list up front. And that will take time. I would give myself about a year, really, to start an e-newsletter. That sounds like a long time, but it really isn't when you think about the strategy behind it, when you think about who might be interested. And so we have people give an email address where they get a library card. Okay, so there you go. So you do have some, and I don't know how many that is, but again, I would say if you feel like you are not going to reach, I don't know, at least 50% of your audience yet, you don't have enough emails to reach 50% of your audience, I would wait until you got to that point, and then you continuously grow it from that point. You can, again, I would always have people opt out, not in, but always be honest with people about how you're going to use their email address as well. So as you gather those at events, as you talk to people, you make sure that they know, and make sure you don't have duplicates. And if someone says, hey, I don't want to receive an email, you have to follow that. So again, making sure you have a system that's tight enough so that you aren't violating any laws, frankly, of people's privacy, and them not, and them receiving emails from you when they don't want to, frankly. Does that help you with your question that you were asking, Barbara? Awesome. I see some more people typing. And I am happy to answer more questions. Is marketing via text message worthwhile? That's a good one. You know what? I will say to you, Jessica, it is if it's done well. I never say no to any type of option for marketing, because some of this is like where you see what works for your area, your county. But I think texting messages, yes, it is worthwhile if you feel like you can do that on a regular basis and decide what information you want to put in text messaging that's going to be important to your customers. So I'm not sure exactly what you were thinking of on that level, but absolutely it's an option to think about. Angela, you asked, how important is it to have different languages for flyers? So I feel like it's very important. Specifically, you have to know the dialects in your area, and maybe you choose like the top 2 to 3 languages. For instance, at some of our branches, we'll put things out in Chin, because the Burmese population is popular there, but you have Chin, the Chin speakers. Spanish is always the way to go. As a starter, I feel like it's like the starter anytime you want to do a second language. And I will say we are just moving into this. A way that you can start that is make sure that you have Google Translate on your website so that people can translate. It's not a perfect solution. It just isn't, but it is a start. I will say Charlotte Mecklenburg does a really great job of putting things in Spanish. Si se puede, I think, is like Yes We Can is their English version, and Si se puede, and they put that even on vans. You see that out and about in the community as a big campaign. So I think it is important. And then also, how do you translate that onto social media? That's where you're going to have a challenge, Angela, period. Unless you have a native speaker that can be behind your keyboard, that is hard. We've wanted to do that, but frankly, we just don't have anyone in the system that we can rely on enough to help move that along. And I can imagine that a lot of people really do struggle with that. In a perfect world, though, yes, it would be great. Again, at least in Spanish, we have had customers ask in Spanish, even though they spoke English, they preferred to message in Spanish. And so we had to work through that where we asked the staff member, but doing that on a regular basis on social media truly would be, we just could not handle that capacity right now, which I will tell you for us is a loss and something we would love to grow in. So we have a few minutes here, what, till 2 o'clock? Do we have till 2 o'clock? So now's the time to ask all the questions you would like. Also, I will talk you through a little bit of this idea on social media of looking at your metrics. As you look at your metrics on social media, that is something I would say you should check back in once a quarter, just to benchmark, are you growing, and really thinking about what would you, in an ideal world, what would you like your audience to look like? So is it not diverse enough? So what does that mean? Your content isn't ethnically diverse enough. Are you trying to engage more mothers who are within a certain age category? What's the content around that? So really using your metrics to grow that, but also being honest about who is following you, and creating messages around that as well. You always want to feed to your target inner audience, and then as you want to grow your messaging, making sure that you're creating messages that reach out to those folks. Holly asks, how much lead time does your marketing department get on programs? Just particular programs, our folks, well, I will say this. So for our events calendar, the person who does it, he does these 45 days out. So we know for sure if you want to be on the events calendar, we need your information 45 days out. But I will tell you, because we do printed materials, we have a guideline about what that timeline is for when we need information. So we lay that out depending on the type of program. If this is a large campaign, frankly, we're at the point where we're asking for 3 months out. If we know it's the summer reading program and this thing is going to be big, we need 3 months to really come together and figure out all of the pieces of this project. Or it could be something smaller, right? If it's just happening on a branch level and the branch wants to make their own flyer, where we say, send us your flyer 2 weeks before it goes out so we can take a look at it, make sure branding matches, and then we'll send it back to you. So for us, it just depends on the size of the program and the reach as to when we expect to receive it, to receive information. But if it's going to be pretty weighty, we ask for a long lead time on that. And I know sometimes that doesn't always work great. You know, people are like, oh my gosh, I can't get the information out that soon. But we feel like if we really need to create a plan, a marketing strategy around something, it benefits and behooves folks to make sure they get it to us as soon as possible. So that is kind of just my thought there. On this social media thing, I'm not sure about on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, how many of you have several accounts for. When I just tell you, when I got to the Indianapolis Public Library, we easily had 200 social media accounts where people had just started accounts because frankly, that's what they were told to do. They were just, you know, they were like, just engage social media. And so when I got there, I was like, how did that happen? And so just learning the story behind that. And we went through a really hard period of scaling those down to 1. I will tell you, it wasn't fun. It didn't always feel friendly. And people still to this day say, how come we don't, you know, our patrons want this, how come we don't have this? I try to explain to people that, you know, we understand that having one social media account is not the perfect solution, but it's closer to perfect than what we had before. And so I really encourage you to really take hold of that and really take control of it as your messaging, as your language, because you own that channel. It's like you're the station owner. You own that regular communication with your patrons. You own whether or not you're closing your building, or if there's a power outage. I mean, it's more than just marketing and talking about programs. It is about patron convenience. So let's say a patron shows up, but they follow you on social media and they didn't know that you were going to be closed. How angering is that when you could have easily told them that on social media? So again, it's this idea of really looking at social media as your prime channel and ways that you can get information out to people quickly and immediately. So we are down to 2 minutes. If you got one last question, by all means, feel free to throw it in there. You are more than welcome to reach out to me at kcrowder, KCROWDER, at INDYPL.org. And I am happy to share in any way that I can. Also, I recently just did a story about marketing and including diversity in your marketing strategy on superlibrarymarketing.com. It's a blog that is written by Angela Hirsch, who is in Cincinnati at Cincinnati Public Library, who's an awesome friend of mine, and she has a great blog. So there's lots of tips on that blog that are chock full of information about marketing, library marketing as well. So I would check that article out. It just came out on Monday. So if you aren't signed up for her blog, you should subscribe to it. It's excellent.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you all for taking time out to join us. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions.